Namaste, aloha, and welcome. My name is Janapati and tonight is the Yoga Wisdom class, the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, as translated by my spiritual grandfather, the spiritual master of my spiritual master, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are going to get a little bit into this Bhagavad Gita, the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita tonight. So please accept my respects. Thank you very much for joining tonight. And let's get started. We're going to do a little bit of hearing and chanting of Krishna's names, of course, as is very popular on Yoga Kirtan Hawai'i, because this is the best means of meditation in this day and age of Kali Yuga that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu established as the best way to come to self-realization and happiness in our life here. So let me grab my pick. Okay, Haribo. Namah Vishnu Daya Krishna Prasthaya Paramam Sayitina Namah Vishnu Daya Krishna Prasthaya Paramam Sayitina Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Okay, Haribol. Welcome to the Wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita class. If you've just joined now, I see a few people have already joined. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Janapati Das, and this is the Wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita class. We are reading from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, translated by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This class is once a month, and maybe you've joined some of my previous classes. So we are going to continue reading and discussing the Bhagavad Gita. As I've always said, it's impossible to really even barely scratch the surface of the beauty and the depth of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. And so what I would like to do is talk a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad is the Sanskrit word for God, or a name of the Supreme. And Gita is a song. So it's loosely translated as a song of God. And I'm going to drink some water. So the Song of God is an eternal and ever revealing conversation that the Supreme Lord and the living entity are having. Or in other words, it is the Bhagavad Gita, or the Song of God, is also the eternal loving relationship between the living entity and the Supreme Lord. And it's a very wonderful thing. So why is this called Bhagavad Gita as it is? Because it is what it is. Many times you will say, I think as we did last time, we read the introduction, how Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he commented that, if you have this copy, you'll know that in the beginning he talks about this. He says that somebody asked him, why, if for a recommendation for a good copy of the Bhagavad Gita before he translated this. And he honestly couldn't give them a really good reference, because the truth is that many people try to translate the Bhagavad Gita, but they don't translate the Bhagavad Gita as it is. They don't present it in the spirit of what it is. And what it is this eternal relationship, this eternal conversation that's going on between the Supreme Lord and the living entity. And the only way that the purport even said within the Bhagavad Gita itself, the only way that one can understand the Bhagavad Gita is from Krishna, is by understanding Krishna, or by understanding their relationship with Krishna. And so what we were discussing here was that this Bhagavad Gita is set on a battlefield, of all places, a very pertinent place. It is a conversation between Arjuna, the prince warrior Arjuna, and the Supreme Lord Krishna. But it can be really anybody. It's actually a treatise for all living entities entrapped in the material world. And so in the story, Arjuna is bewildered with a situation where he has to fight in a war, a very, very, this is a serious war, the war of on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where millions and millions of warriors are about to fight on each side. And Krishna and Arjuna are on the chariot, and Krishna is driving the chariot for Arjuna. And Arjuna has asked Krishna to draw the chariot into the middle of the battle, the middle of the battlefield. Actually, the battle has not started yet. This is not like modern warfare where people just randomly, willy-nilly drop bombs on civilians and stuff. There was a whole etiquette during this time for warriors, and the battle started when it was ready to start. And there were rules and regulations as kshatriyas, or warriors. That's the term, the caste of administrators and kingly, or I should say monarchy, kings and princes and warriors and administrators are the kshatriya class. And so Arjuna was a kshatriya, and he was about to fight. He was an incredible warrior, incredible statesman, and very wise person. But he was faced with a dilemma, because once he came in the middle of the battlefield, he looked out upon the battlefield and he saw that on both sides there were people he knew. He knew, there were people who were in the same family, sometimes fighting on the opposite side. There were martial teachers and grandfathers and cousins and people that he loved and cared about, and he became very compassionate. And he had a dilemma, and that dilemma was that he was not sure he wanted to fight. He actually not sure he didn't want to fight. He came to the conclusion that it would be better for him to leave the battlefield and give up the fight for the kingdom that they were fighting for. Because if you've read the Mahabharata, or if you haven't read the Mahabharata, basically there was a sort of a fight between the cousins. Arjuna and his brothers, who were known as the Pandava brothers, were rightly the kings, and because of their blood right, they were the kingdom of the world was supposed to belong to them, but actually their cousins had usurped the kingship of and had decided they did not want to give it back. So basically it had come to this point after many, many years or months of diplomatic means of trying to stop this war. It came to this point. But Arjuna said, I don't want to fight for this battle. And so, as we recall, we discussed this chapter 2 about what Krishna had basically decided that what he was telling Arjuna about the nature. And some of the points that he was bringing up was that you're looking out on the battlefield and you're seeing that all these people that you love and you care about are going to fight in the battlefield, and you don't want to. You'd rather give up your kingdom, go into the forest to meditate, and not fight for your kingdom, because you don't want your family members to be killed in this battlefield, which on a surface level seems like the right thing to do. But Krishna explains to him why it's not the right thing to do. And one of the first points he brings up into chapter 2 is that some of these verses that we've read already. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings on the battlefield, nor any in the future shall any of them cease to be, any of us. And so that is a very radical statement. It's basically saying that these living entities on the field are temporarily playing a position of these warriors, as are you. And they are eternal living beings, as am I, the Supreme Lord. We are all eternal. Never was there a time when we appear to be born into a body. We live for a while, and then the body dies, but actually we continue on, as is said in the following verse. I believe it's chapter 2, verse 13. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from youth to old age, then similarly at the time of death, it passes into another body, and that a sober person or a self-realized person is not bewildered by such a change. In other words, he's saying you don't need to be bewildered by this situation, because in any case, they will continue on. Either they're going to, take on another new body, which is nothing to worry about, or he brings up a lot of points, actually. He says, even if you don't believe, as many people sometimes don't believe that there is anything past this life. So why should there be any kind of mourning if at the end of life you're done and that's it? But he's saying, actually, you do continue. You do continue on. And so in this chapter 2, there was a lot of points brought up that were touched upon by Krishna to Arjuna. And this is the situation in the setting that the best way to understand the Bhagavad Gita, or to understand the absolute truth, is to approach, just as it's said in chapter 4, verse 34 of the Bhagavad Gita, just try to learn the truth by approaching a self-realized soul. The self-realized soul, or the spiritual master, can tell you the truth because they have seen the truth. Okay? So, in other words, what Arjuna is doing in a situation here is approaching Krishna in a humble. He's, of course, in chapter 1, maybe we've read this already, he lays out all of his knowledge that he's learned in the Vedic thinking, of all the reasons why he should not fight this battle. So it's like he does bring the question to Krishna, what should I do? But I'm not going to fight, and these are the reasons why I'm not going to fight. Let me tell you why I'm not going to fight. And so this is actually a very good situation to understand, because this is the living entity's dilemma, is that, what I think, you always heard that. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada always said that even the drunk in the gutter has an opinion. You know what I think? So actually, Arjuna is just like everyone, I think what would be better for me to do is to do this. And so every living entity has been in the material world right now for the very reason of, what I think, God, Krishna, what I think? I think I would do better if I were the supreme controller. If everything was centered around me. And this is the dilemma of the living entity, is that we're all in this material world in a very self-centered, selfish, what do I get out of it attitude. So, and you know what I think. But actually Arjuna was smart enough to put his pride down a little bit, even though he laid out all these ideas in the first chapter, why it was better he didn't fight, and all these rules and injunctions of how fighting this war would be really bad for society, and and so on and so on, he still presented, he said, what should I do? And so the disciple, the living entity, should always approach the bona fide teacher to ask sincere questions. And that's what the Bhagavad Gita, the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita is. It's basically, it's contemplating, it's wisdom. And when you have the issues in your life, then you take the humble position and you surrender to someone who does know, who is also surrendered to a previous, just like my teacher had surrendered his life to Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to learn about the absolute truth. And Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada also surrendered to his spiritual master Bhaktisiddhanta, and so on and so on. This is the process. You learn from the master. And so so he asked these questions. So we've basically now coming to a point here, is that we had come to the chapter 3. He basically had learned about a lot of little things like Shankha Yoga, Karma Yoga, Buddha Yoga, and reasons why it was better to fight in the battle. But Arjuna still had questions, and so he was still presenting these questions. And I'm just going to read a little bit of what we left off with last time. So Arjuna said, O Janardhan, O Keshava, this is the beginning of the chapter 3, which is entitled Karma Yoga. O Keshava, why do you urge me to engage in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? So this is a very important question, because even though Arjuna had heard some things already from Krishna, he's still presenting things. He's still seeing things as like, well, you're saying it's better buddhi, which is the word in Sanskrit, which means intelligence, he's thinking, well, if I use my intelligence, it would be better, though, for me to go off to the forest to practice Krishna consciousness or practice focusing my life in spiritual matters and not try to get the kingdom, which is considered fruitive work. When we say fruitive work, it's like fruit. It's this idea that we work for something and we try to enjoy it. We're working for something to enjoy, which is basically what everybody's doing in this material world. We are all trying to work to try to find some happiness and some pleasure from this fruit. And I think we used this example before. There's an analogy in one of the Upanishads, or one of the scriptures in the Vedas, of two birds on the tree. One is the Supreme Lord, the Super Soul, the Lord within the heart. And the other bird is the living entity, or the Jivatma, who is eating the fruits off the tree, is actually dealing with the miserable reactions of trying to eat it, but still trying to enjoy it. And so this is what we were talking about when we were about fruitive work. It's like the idea of like, let me do this for myself. I want to enjoy it. I want to enjoy this. I want to get the fruit from this. And Krishna, Arjuna's making a pretty legitimate point. He's saying, well, wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't it be better to use your intelligence wouldn't it be more intelligent to go off to the forest and not enjoy the kingdom? And so this is the idea of a renunciation. And it's a very interesting point to study about what does it mean to be a renunciate. A lot of times people think of a renounced life as giving up something, as Arjuna was thinking in this situation. I'm just going to give up something that I can enjoy so that I can, but he's actually really getting, I will get this if I don't, do this. But there's a really nice analogy that I've heard in this sense, and it has to do with like money. Okay, so you have like $20 that on the ground. So first of all, you have a materialist who is the first person who comes along. He sees the $20 on the ground. He's like, oh, looks around. He's like, make sure no one else is going to take it. And he's like, grabs the $20 and sticks it in his pocket, and he thinks, oh yeah, I'm going to enjoy now from this. Now it's got $20 or it's $100 or whatever. And so that's the materialist, the so-called yogi or renunciate that is the renunciate, as Arjuna is talking about, like, I'm just giving up all these bad things, just so I can go, be a spiritual person, right? Is the person who sees the $20 on the ground, he's like, ooh, evil, Satan. Yeah. And he goes the other way, he doesn't touch the $20. And the third person, which is the devotee, or the bhakta, the devotee of Krishna, he'll see the $20 and he realizes it belongs to somebody. And he takes the $20 and he goes to try to find who it belongs to. So that is the true renunciate, the third person, because they know that the $20 they find on the ground belongs. In other words, everything belongs to Krishna. All the energies belong to Krishna. Let me take it and use it in the service of Krishna. So this is what Arjuna is actually not really quite getting. So he makes this in the statements in the next couple chapters by saying, you're asking me if intelligence is higher, but my intelligence is actually bewildered. So it's true. He's recognizing the fact that his real intelligence, and this is a very high faculty, that spiritually we do have spiritual intelligence. My intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively what is most beneficial for me. That's the way a disciple should be. I don't understand this. I can't understand it with my mind. I'm trying to figure it out with my mind and try to make it right. But here, tell me what's the best thing to do. So he's a soul surrendered to Krishna. That's how the student should be to the spiritual teacher. That a surrendered soul, ready to receive the information. So, and that's what we get to this point here. Blessed Lord said, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who realize the self. Some are inclined to understand him by empirical philosophical speculation, and others are inclined to know him by devotional work. So he's laying out the fact that there are different ways of understanding the self, and that the better of the two, as Bhaktivedanta says here later, the better of the two, the indirect process is philosophical speculation, by which gradually one may come to the point of Krishna consciousness, and the other process is directly connecting everything in Krishna consciousness. Of these two, the path of Krishna consciousness is better because it does not depend on purifying the senses by a philosophical process. So there's a lot of really, really exciting things in this chapter that you can get, that we'll get to, that explaining the idea of doing work, or doing what we call work. It's not like, I'm going to work, hi-ho, off to work I go. Can be that, but it's basically acting. And the word karma in karma yoga means action. So it's not, oftentimes people think of karma as like, ooh, karma's a bitch, or you're going to get karma, or the instant karma. They don't really have an understanding of what they're talking about. But karma yoga is just an action. It's the fact that is brought up, and I'll bring it up here as I read it a little bit more, but that Krishna brings up the point that karma, that the living entity is a spiritual entity, and it's not whether they are not in the body or not in the body, whether they're in the spiritual world in their spiritual body, or whether they're incarnated into our bodies like we have right now. The living entity is active. It's not void. It's not empty. It's not. Sometimes some Buddhists or some kinds of paths of yoga think that there's there's a non-differentiated energy that's just or voidness, that's an emptiness. It's not active, but actually the living entity is forever, eternally, an individual spirit soul. It is it's actively doing something. So when in the material world, it's most likely, most cases, 99.9999%, acting to try to eat that fruit, eat the fruit off the tree. It's trying to be actively doing things to try to find happiness, which is really actually just a perverted reflection of love or loving service to the Supreme, which is the way we normally act in the spiritual world. But in the material world, because we come into contact with the material energy, we are influenced by what is known as the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And therefore we are forced to act in the way of trying to find some kind of happiness. Unless we really use our intelligence and realize, hey, this kind of sucks. Why am I completely miserable when I'm trying to find happiness in this world? Maybe there's something else. That's where you get some intelligence and you realize, I need someone to tell me what is the right thing to do. Okay? So what Krishna continues to say in text 4 here is, not merely by abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. So this is this idea of Arjuna wanted to go off to the forest to meditate, to be a yogi. And, he was already a kshatriya. He was a king, he was a warrior, he was actively involved in doing work that was in a particular, field. Some of us are not warriors, some of us are like teachers, or we're married, or maybe we're students, whatever might be the situation. We're in a particular, we do a certain kind of work in this world. So what Krishna is saying is that just because you go off and you don't fight you're gonna have to do that when you're gonna have to sustain yourself, because you can't just go out there and sit and not be. Because even just by sitting, sometimes people are thinking, if I just sit and I meditate and I don't have any thoughts, then I'm not doing anything. But you are doing it. You're sitting around, not freezing your butt up on a mountain in a loincloth thinking of no thoughts. But, that is doing something. So, and he says, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. So what he's talking about there is the type of renunciation that Arjuna was seeking to do. Give up these kind of things, and therefore, if I do that, even with the desires that are still in my mind to enjoy and if I just go off and I try to meditate, then those things will just go away. But what Krishna is saying in this chapter about karma yoga, what is explained about karma yoga, we have action and we have yoga. Yoga means, of course, to connect in a loving relationship with the Supreme. And karma yoga is by how you do that. What you do for Krishna. In other words, and this is what this chapter kind of all goes into. As you read further into this chapter, he's talking about the situation of whatever you do as a service for me. Do it as a service for me, and don't be attached to the results. It's basically, that's the best way to go about it. And you can be, because most people, I don't know about most people, but definitely me, to case, you have things, you have desires in your mind, you have attachments that you want to do this, you want to enjoy that, you want to do these things for your own pleasure. And the best way to deal with that is not to try to just, okay, I'm going to put it over there and I'll just walk away from it and it won't be there with me still. Because the mind is impetuous. It just continually, as is said in here, it's like what do they say? It was like a boat on a really windy river, it just continuously gets blown around, or like a candle in a windy cave. It's just, the mind is not capable of you can't just control it by itself. So you need an activity to be able to replace to be able to do that. And that is in the service of Krishna. So you can be doing what you want to be doing. For example, I'm giving this class. I'm a teacher by trade, and I can be doing other YouTube videos and trying to make money and just enjoy the money or whatever, and go out and eat things and not offer the food to Krishna and just everything for myself and only for myself. Or I can just do those things and do it in the service for Krishna. So I'm doing these classes to teach about the Bhagavad Gita. I don't make money off of them, but I do have a job, so I use my job. I go to my job and I go to my work, and I get in my car that I own, and I go and I make money, and then I use the money for whatever I might be doing for Krishna. So, if I make food, then, I offer the food to Krishna, or if I have to buy a guitar so I can chant Krishna's names, that are, anything and everything, basically, is karma yoga. So karma yoga is just the karma, but you put the yoga at the end. In other words, you're acting like you're going to normally do. You do activities, but you do everything for the service of the Supreme. And that's a very wonderful thing to do, because it's very easy. You're already doing it. But all you got to do is switch the consciousness to, who do I do it for? Am I doing it for me? Or am I doing it for someone else? Am I doing it for Krishna? Do the best I can with it. If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't work out, that's okay. You don't become attached to it. You don't think, oh, God, I could have done that better, so I would have enjoyed, doing a really good job on it. So it's a very wonderful chapter. I really recommend reading through this chapter 3 and reading the purports, because there's so much here to really talk about. Well, let's read some more. So Krishna continues to say, all men are forced to act helplessly. We're basically along for the ride, really, because we're the body, the mind, the senses, the material modes of nature all acting upon us, and we, the spirit soul, are just going along for the ride. And we are forced to act helplessly according to the impulses born of the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. So that was just going back to what we were saying. But the next chapter, he says, one who restrains the senses and organs of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So that's a great verse too, because, sometimes going back to this idea that Arjuna wanted to go off to the forest, but they're saying, if you go off to the forest, but you're still thinking about things, if you're thinking about things not about Krishna, but you're thinking about, oh, this and that. Well, this happens all the time, actually. People really, really want to be seen as like a spiritual guru or whatever. But their mind, they are not purified in their mind yet. They still have all, because just alone of wanting to be a guru or being a spiritual master, a spiritual teacher, is in itself can be a high, strong material attachment, because then suddenly people are like, wow, that guy is really neat, and he's got a bald head that's really shiny, or he's got a long glowing hair that he washes and combs every day, and he's got a long beard, and he's got gleaming eyes, and he just has these long robes, and people like this, there are so many people like that, actually, a lot of so-called gurus who've ended up like that. But because they have that desire for sense enjoyment, what happens to them? They end up sleeping with their disciples, because the disciples are attracted to them, and for whatever reason, because they're pretty looking, and then they're like, oh wow, beautiful girls, or maybe beautiful boys, or even some cases, the children. They go after the children because it's like they're perverted, and then they're getting, money from their followers, so they have all these riches, and so therefore it really is not even about teaching people spiritual truth. It's just about a way using religion or using spirituality to basically achieve material, to be a pretender, basically, to be a pretender and to be a materialist. And this happens not only as yogis, but in a lot of different religions. So-called religious people, they're very charismatic, but then they get all entangled up. They're sleeping with their parishioners. They're sleeping with the parishioners' wives or husbands or children or whatever, and they're ripping off people, making money off of them because they're charismatic, and they're using the religion or so-called spirituality as a means, to do. And they, maybe initially too, they're like, oh, I'm very, celibate because I don't, and people are attracted to that. So actually what Krishna is telling Arjuna here is, that this is what can happen. You'll be a pretender. And not only to mention that, he's mentioning the fact that what great men do, common men follow. So it's like, you're a great soul, Arjuna, or you're a great warrior. You go off to the forest, everybody's going to think like, I can just abandon my duty, abandon my work, and just go off and be a guru in the forest too. So instead, you could be like, set an example by doing your duty, by being a kshatriya, by fighting in this war, by being an administrator, following the rules and regulations up to the T, and doing it all for Krishna. And everyone will look to you and say, that is a great warrior, Arjuna. He follows his spiritual master. He follows he does his duty, and they will follow that, and they will be spiritually elevated because of it. So I'll read a little bit more of the purport here, because there's so many wonderful verses. I've only gotten into text 6, and Bhaktivedanta says here, there are many pretenders who refuse to work in Krishna consciousness but make a show of meditation, while actually dwelling within the mind upon sense enjoyment. Such pretenders may also speak on dry philosophy in order to bluff sophisticated followers. So that's a really important point. He was like, that, Krishna is mentioning that there is one way that people try to understand the truth, and that's through philosophical speculation. And there are a lot of people who are very attracted to this kind of but he also says that people who are sincere, even if they are speculators and what they call gyanis, or really kind of like heavy thinkers, philosophers or whatever, if they are really sincere, they will ultimately come to a point of understanding it's about Krishna consciousness, or about service to the Supreme, which Krishna said, was the better of the two. So some people just go directly to the service of Krishna, engaging in karma yoga, and they're not very heavy thinkers, they're not speculators, but they just engage in. That is the best way to go, and they learn the absolute truth from their teacher anyways. And then there's some people who are very heavy speculators, and they keep coming with questions, which is okay too, because if you're sincere in your heart of really wanting to know the absolute truth, then Krishna will make it available for you. So such pretenders may also speak on dry philosophy in order to bluff sophisticated followers, but according to this verse, these are the greatest cheaters. So some people are not very honest at all, but they're actually very charismatic, and they're very they can speak very wonderfully, and people are just entranced by them. I was watching a documentary about World War II, and you have people like that, some great leaders like Hitler or whatever. They can just say the right things, and people are They know that these people are in the right frame of mind to receive a certain kind of twisted message, as twisted as it may be. They think it's the right message, and they just fall for it. For sense enjoyment, one may act in any capacity of the social order, but if one follows the rules and regulation of his particular status, he can make gradual progress in purifying his existence. But he who makes a show of being a yogi, while actually searching for the objects of sense gratification, must be called the greatest cheater, even though he sometimes speaks of philosophy. His knowledge has no value, because the effects of such a sinful man's knowledge are taken away by the illusory energy of the Lord. Such a pretender's mind is always impure, and therefore his show of yogic meditation has no value whatsoever. So there are people like this who are actually, you know, they don't really have they don't really, you know, this just goes back to Arjuna. He was saying, you know, he was saying to Arjuna that, you know, you can go off to the forest and pretend that you're a yogi, and then maybe fool some people, and they think that you're being, you know, you're this way or that way. Or you could be a true, you know, follow what I want you to do. In other words, follow your activity, your karma yoga in the service of me, and gradually you will make that elevation, and you will set an example for the people around you. Because, you know, the bottom line is that everybody's in a different spiritual place. It's not like everyone's on the same level. Some people are in different levels. People have different desires and different things, and Krishna is fulfilling those things accordingly. But the best thing to do is to do your duty. And that's what Krishna is saying, is that if you have an activity and you're doing, you know, maybe you're a musician, you can take your musical abilities, you come to a kirtan, or you start a YouTube channel and you do kirtan with your musical talents, and therefore you're putting your work into the service of Krishna, and it's a very wonderful thing. It's not only beneficial for yourself, it's also beneficial for everyone who hears you, who's around you. So this is, I'm going to stop there, because, you know, I would just recommend that you just go ahead and continue and take time every day to read the Bhagavad Gita as it is, because it's a wonderful, wonderful book. And like I said, you know, we can spend hours and hours discussing things, and just really, it just keeps going. It just keeps revealing itself. So we're going to do some more chanting Krishna's names. So thank you very much. I think I'm out of time. So thank you very much. Stay tuned for more wonderful things on Yoga Kirtan Hawaii. And have a good night. Aloha.